You know that feeling sometimes when the world just doesn't feel quite real, maybe dreamlike. That's often called derealization.
Huh?
Or maybe you feel detached from yourself, like you're watching your own life. Depersonalization. It's deeply unsettling.
It really is.
So today we're going to dive deep into the fears, the very real fears that people have when they experience this kind of stuff. Feelings of unreality, alienation.
Yeah, we're drawing from this document, fears.pdf, which lays out some really common anxieties tied to this.
Right. And it makes sense, doesn't it? If your reality or even your sense of self feels off, artificial, fear seems like a pretty natural response.
Totally. Perceiving what should be solid and real as somehow unreal. Well, that can be terrifying at a fundamental level.
So our mission today in this deep dive is really to unpack these specific fears from the source doc.
Exactly. Understand where they come from, how they connect to that feeling of unreality, and just get a clearer perspective on them. Not necessarily solving them here, but understanding them.
Okay, let's jump into the first big one. The source highlights this really common fear, the fear of going crazy.
Hmm.
It sounds maybe a bit cliche, but if you're feeling disconnected from your own thoughts, your own feelings, I can totally see how that would be a major worry, a really serious one.
Absolutely. And what's key here, the source points out, is that people experiencing this often become genuinely convinced they are losing their minds. Or maybe they think they already have.
It's not just a passing thought then.
No, not at all. It can generate really intense anxiety. And the source connects this to, well, some practical, real-world outcomes people worry about.
Like what sort of outcomes?
Well, the fear of not being able to function anymore, in society, holding down a job, relationships, just
Right.
daily life.
Right.
And then the really stark fear of needing to be institutionalized, put in a psychiatric facility,
Mm-hmm.
if your reality feels like it's slipping.
Yeah, the thought of completely losing your grip is understandably terrifying.
Yeah.
That paints a clear picture. Okay, the next fear the document mentions. This one sounds incredibly deep. The fear of disintegrating or even no longer existing.
Wow. Yeah.
That just gives you a visceral feeling thinking about it, like looking at your own hand and it not feeling like yours.
It is profoundly unsettling. The source talks about it as this internal feeling like you're falling apart inside, dissolving almost.
Dissolving?
Yeah. People might struggle with where their body ends and the world begins. That sense of physical boundary gets blurry. They feel disconnected from their own body.
Like it's not really theirs.
Exactly. And at its most extreme, the source says this can lead people to question if they even exist at all. It hits right at the core of your sense of self.
Wow. That level of disconnect is hard to wrap your head around. Okay, then there's the fear of having a severe illness.
Right.
This feels like the mind trying to latch onto something concrete, doesn't it? A physical why for these very weird, abstract feelings.
That's a great way to put it. The source really emphasizes this, how people worry there's some underlying incurable physical disease causing it all.
Like what kinds of diseases?
Well, the document lists things like brain tumors, other neurological disorders, but also psychotic disorders, even schizophrenia.
So the feeling of unreality gets translated into a symptom, a warning sign of something physical.
Precisely. And here's a crucial point the source makes.
Mm.
Often, people can't easily explain these feelings of detachment.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they also have some vague physical stuff going on, aches, pains, weird sensations.
Mm-hmm.
And they start seeing those as proof. Proof of that serious, undiagnosed illness they're worried about. It's like searching for a physical answer for something that feels so internal and strange.
Yeah, sounds like it could become a real cycle of anxiety. Okay, moving on. The document also talks about the fear that this condition, this feeling, will just get worse and worse and never actually go away.
That's a heavy one.
Yeah, carrying that weight.
It really is. And you can understand why, right?
Mhm.
If these feelings of unreality or alienation just stick around, or they keep coming back.
You'd naturally start to worry, this is it, this is permanent.
Absolutely. The source acknowledges just how much distress these ongoing or recurring feelings cause. And that fear that it's only going to get more intense, that it'll become your fixed reality, that's a huge burden for a lot of people.
Okay, now this next one. This one feels almost backwards. The fear of actually waking up from the unreality.
Yes, that one definitely makes you pause.
It does. It seems counterintuitive.
It is, but it's quite poignant when you think about it. If you've been living in this sort of unreal state for a long time, the idea of suddenly snapping back to real can actually be pretty daunting.
Why, though? What's the fear there?
The source points to the worry about suddenly realizing just how much life you missed out on during that time.
Ah, like the world kept going, but you were kind of paused.
Exactly that feeling that life is just passing you by. It's the potential shock of confronting all that lost time, those missed experiences. That reckoning can feel frightening.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this next one hits on a social level. The fear of standing out or maybe losing control in front of other people.
Hmm. Social anxiety amplified.
Yeah, I can imagine feeling intensely self-conscious if your inner world feels so radically different from everyone else's. So we've talked internal stuff, but how does this play out, like interacting with others?
Well, the source really emphasizes this fear that other people will notice, that they'll see something's wrong or abnormal.
So you try to hide it?
Exactly. People often put a ton of effort into concealing their internal struggles. The document points out just how much mental energy this takes,
Hmm.
constantly monitoring yourself, your words, your actions, trying not to give anything away.
God, that sounds exhausting, like being constantly on guard.
It is. And then there's the flip side of that coin, the intense fear of actually losing control, having some kind of public breakdown, or as the source puts it, freaking out.
Right. So you're trying desperately to seem normal while also terrified you might just completely unravel in front of everyone.
It's a really tough bind to be in.
Yeah. The source material also mentions panic attacks. Sounds like there's a pretty strong link there with these feelings of unreality.
Ugh, a very strong connection. The source explains it can go both ways. Those underlying feelings of unreality or alienation can kind of build up and act as a trigger, pushing someone into a full panic attack. Like the baseline anxiety just boils over.
Okay. And does it work the other way too? Can panic attacks bring on the unreality?
Absolutely. The source notes that too. The sheer intensity of a panic attack, the fear, the physical sensations that experience itself can trigger or seriously ramp up feelings of depersonalization or derealization.
So it's like a feedback loop.
Exactly. Anxiety and unreality feeding each other.
Right. Okay, finally, the document gets into dysfunctional coping mechanisms. This part's pretty sobering, actually, how these deep fears can lead people towards behaviors that are actually harmful.
It's a really critical point. The source highlights how fear can push people into developing these unhealthy strategies just to try and cope with the distress.
Like what sort of things?
Well, things like obsessive thoughts, where the same worries just loop endlessly, and compulsive behaviors. The example given is really striking. Someone repeatedly checking their reflection in a mirror.
Why? To check they're still there.
Yeah, essentially. To try and confirm their own existence, their own reality. Just picturing someone doing that over and over,
Yeah.
it really drives home the intensity of that struggle.
It really does. Wow.
And then, the source mentions something deeply concerning.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's an urge to self-harm.
Oh, wow.
Not necessarily with suicidal intent, but as a desperate way to just feel something real again, to cut through that awful numbness and detachment.
To feel anything.
Exactly. And tragically, the source notes, sometimes people do act on those impulses. It's just a stark reminder of how profoundly devastating these experiences can be for someone.
Yeah, that's heavy. It's a really powerful overview, though, of all the different fears that can wrap around depersonalization and derealization. So to kind of bring this deep dive towards a close, what's the main takeaway the source leaves us with?
I think the crucial point the document makes is that these fears, okay, they're common, they're understandable given the experience,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have to just be passively accepted.
Right. You don't just have to live with them.
Exactly. It stresses that you can take action. You can do something
Hmm.
about the fears and about the underlying state of unreality itself.
So it's not just about understanding the fears, but recognizing the source really pushes for being proactive. It
Mhm.
ends with this really direct call, doesn't it? Take action. Do something about your fears and about the state of depersonalization and derealization.
Mm.
Do not remain passive or simply wait for things to change. Your life is too valuable for that. That really lands. It makes you think about taking back some control, even when things feel so out of control, unreal. What hits you most about that final message?
For me, it's the idea that just understanding these fears, like we've been talking about,
Mm.
that's often the essential first step towards taking that action.
Ah, right. Naming it helps.
Precisely. By identifying and acknowledging these specific anxieties, you can start to address them more directly, instead of just feeling crushed by this vague, overwhelming dread. It kind of fights against that passivity these feelings can sometimes trap you in. It encourages finding some agency, even when things feel really, really difficult.
That's a powerful thought, isn't it? And maybe relevant even if you haven't personally felt these specific things. How often do we face challenges and just feel stuck, like we have to endure them?
Hmm.
When maybe taking some kind of action, even a small step, could actually shift things. Definitely food for thought.